how much do they owe us now? And they figure interest not on the 1,000, but on the 1,012.50. And so the interest that you owe at the end of the second month is 1,025. You do that every single month, and at the end of the year, you owe 1,160. Same exact interest rate, 15% per year, but when calculated on a monthly basis, you don't owe 1,150, you owe 1,160. Now think about this on a daily basis, because that's what the credit card companies do. Every day, they're adding interest to how much you owe, and then they're calculating interest on the interest that you owe them from the day prior. That's why compounding is so powerful a force, and why you can get yourself in trouble with these credit card companies. Let's linger for a minute on credit card companies, because this was a very good question. There's a new law, but first let's talk about the basics with credit card companies. How many have credit cards in the room? Pretty much everybody. How many have debit cards? Good. How many have more than 5 credit cards? Okay. The average, I think 14% of the households in the United States have more than 10 credit cards. And about 85% of the households in the United States have at least one. I think the average is 3 or 4 credit cards per household in the United States. Anybody want to guess how much the total credit card debt in the United States? Total credit card debt, meaning all of us who have credit cards that we might owe a little bit of money on, you add it all up, it's about $1 trillion. $1 trillion. The story of credit cards is they are deliberately made easy to use. By the way, does anybody know whoever came up with credit cards? How did credit cards even come into being? Well, here's how it happened. 1960, one of the big banks said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we just dropped a whole bunch of credit cards in people's mailboxes in Bakersfield, California? They might not know how to use them, but they'll learn. So let's just pass them out to 50,000 people in Southern California and see what happens. So they just sent them out to people and said, here's a credit card, here's how it works, why don't you try it? Of course, people got hooked, and before you know it, 10 years later, credit cards were a phenomenon. Nobody stood up and said, hey, would somebody please invent a credit card? I want a credit card. That's not what happened. The banks invented the credit card, and they basically hooked all of us on this whole credit card borrowing, easy money. And a lot of us, and including me at different points in my life, had too much credit card debt because it's so easy to take that credit card out of your pocket. It is not an accident that it's so small and so thin. That is not an accident. By the way, I told my daughter not too long ago, who might at times have a credit card issue, wrap a rubber band around your credit card so that every time you reach into your purse, A, it's a little harder to get out, and B, while you're unwrapping that rubber band, take you 5 or 6 seconds, maybe you have a second thought about, do you really need to use it? She didn't think much of my idea, but she's my daughter. So credit cards. The banks sort of dropped them into the United States society, and they became a phenomenon. Everybody knows how credit cards work. You put your credit card in a vendor's hands, whatever you're buying. You then get whatever you're buying, assuming that you have the credit to make the purchase and the bank doesn't stop the authorization. Then you get what you buy. You get a bill. The bill comes. Let's say you spent that month $1,000, and it says at the bottom, required monthly payment or minimum monthly payment. How many think it's a good idea to pay the minimum monthly payment? No. Bad idea. Bad idea. These banks are so shrewd. What they figured out is that if you pay the minimum payment, and some of them use the word required monthly minimum payment. Required monthly minimum payment. You know why? Because it sounds, hey, I'm doing what's required. This has got to be good. They're smart. They know how people think. If you make the minimum payment, now remember, the average interest rate for a credit card today is 15 to 17%. If you're making the minimum payment, which used to be about 2% of the balance due, you're never going to pay off your debt. Never. because this interest rate, remember what I told you about compound interest, keeps accumulating. And it keeps adding to your debt, so the best you're doing is staying even, but you're never paying down your debt. Now, why would they want to then induce you to pay the minimum payment? Because that's how they make money. They do not make money when you pay off your debt every month. In fact, do you know what the credit card companies call people who pay off their debt every month? Deadbeats. Deadbeats. Exactly right. They do not like people who pay off their debt every month. That's exactly what they call them, deadbeats. They like people who are in trouble, hanging on by their fingernails. That's who the credit card companies like. And if you're going to add value to You Inc., if you're going to become the CFO of You Inc. and make it more valuable, you got to understand how these credit card companies work, how they trick you, how they seduce you to spend money. Their marketing campaigns are so clever, you know, for this, and then priceless and all that. They're really smart. They know how to get in your head. And if you're going to become the CFO of your life, you got to get on top of this credit card situation. A lot of people are running as fast as they can just to keep up with the credit card company. But finally, some relief. Thank you for bringing this up. In May 22nd of this year, President Obama signed a new law called the Credit Card Responsibility and Disclosure Act. For the first time since credit cards came out in the 1960s, there's now a law which levels the playing field a little bit. That law becomes effective February 20th, 2010. And let's talk about what that law does, because You Inc. should know about this law. It's very, very important. First time ever that the credit card holder, you, us, has some rights against these credit card companies. First thing I'll tell you right now, before this law comes into effect, these credit card companies have all the power. If they want to raise your rate today, just because they get up on the wrong side of the bed one morning or they don't like how the economy's looking, they can pretty much raise your rate whenever they want. Forget about what the marketing material says. Now, if you've got a 0% for 6 months, they can't raise your rate unless you're late with a payment or you go over your credit line. But for 90% of us, they can raise it unilaterally anytime they want, and your question's appropriate, because what's happening today in the United States is these credit card companies are raising people's rates. They're cutting credit lines. They're shortening the grace period, which is the period you have between the time you use your card to pay your bill. They're canceling cards. Have any of you had any of this in the last couple months, raised rates? Yeah, me too. It's awful what they're doing, and you know why they're doing it? They're doing it because in February of 2010, the law is going to change. They're not going to have the same freedom to do it. In fact, the new law says that they can't just raise rates whenever they feel like it. Within the term of your credit card agreement, which for most people is about a year, they cannot just unilaterally raise rates. No matter what the economy is doing, as long as you're making your payments on time, they can't just unilaterally raise rates. You know how else these credit card companies make money? Late fees. If you're 1 day late, they can charge you a $39 late fee, even if the cost of you being 1 day late costs them $1. They still charge you a $39 late fee. That's changing too. The new law says these fees have to be reasonable. How about if you have a $1,000 line on your credit card and you go over it? And this is an important question I want to ask you, because it also applies to debit cards. I want to ask how people feel about this. If you have a $1,000 credit line on your credit card and you spend $1,001, you're going to get what's called an over-the-limit, over-the-line fee of $39. Same with a debit card. A debit card, as you know, is just a way to use money that's in your account with the convenience of what looks like and acts like a credit card, but it's a debit card. Now, if you have a debit card, and here's a big issue that they're debating in Washington right now. You have a debit card and you have $1,000 in your account. And you're out to, it could be anywhere. You're out to dinner, you're at a movie, you hand the person your debit card, and your use of that debit card puts you over the $1,000. So here's the question. Should the movie theater or the restaurant, wherever you are, say, sorry, we can't take this card,